Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news for the Nebraska Cornhusker fans coming out of the recruiting trail as the number 2 player in the country, the number 1 offensive tackle in the 2025 class, 5-star David Sanders Jr., going to be making his way up to Lincoln, Nebraska for an official visit. And this is an offensive tackle that we've been talking about really for the last 12 months as one of the more impressive offensive tackles that I've seen come from the high school ranks, 6'6", 270 pounds. One of the more athletic, functional, big bodies that I've seen coming from the high school ranks. And you look at the kind of tackles that Matt Rhule likes to go after from the high school recruiting trail. It's these kind of guys that have all that athleticism that maybe just need to put on a little bit more weight. You know how Matt Rhule wants to build this program, and it starts from the line of scrimmage. David Sanders Jr., I think, immediately becomes the top target for Nebraska in this 2025 class. Want to get into David Sanders Jr., talk a little bit about some other names that will be on campus for this Nebraska program. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Nebraska fans. Whether we're talking the transfer portal, the high school recruiting trail, y'all know I have a blast talking this Nebraska program. All the Go Big Reds you guys throw in the comments section, that stuff means the world. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's early May. It's official visit season. We're going to be talking a lot about this program on the recruiting trail. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Now, you dive into David Sanders Jr., and he just checks so many boxes. One, I always look for that functional athleticism from these offensive linemen, especially at that offensive tackle position. David Sanders Jr. carries about 270 pounds, as well as you will see. And on top of the 270 pounds, he has 36-inch arms. So you look at 6'6", 270 pounds. Yes, that's a little light for an offensive tackle. This kid carries that weight exceptionally well, has plenty of room to get up to around 310, 315 pounds. Was on Twitter the other day, saw him cleaning 315 pounds. And it seemed like the bar had no weight on it. You talk about the power that David Sanders Jr. can produce. He's a track and field guy too, shot put, discus. Matt Rhule likes the track and field athletes. You start looking at the boxes that you want to see checked from offensive tackles coming from the high school ranks. Functional athleticism, probably number 1. That's probably his strongest calling card. You have the length with 36-inch arms. This is a guy that checks every single box that you want to see, kind of a guy that has top 10 pick written all over him in the NFL draft. And I think the biggest thing to talk about is, Matt Rhule wants to build this program from the line of scrimmage. You talk about building it the right way. David Sanders Jr. is certainly in that plan for Matt Rhule. And that's not the only premier prospect that will be on campus. You take a look at a guy in Broderick Shull from Oklahoma. This is another really intriguing offensive tackle who, there are some recruiting services that are extremely high on Broderick Shull. You take a look at On3, they have him as the number 19 national player, the number 5 offensive tackle in the 2025 class. And again, very similar story to a guy like David Sanders Jr., who, he's got great functional athleticism. You start looking into the athletic profile, it makes sense why Matt Rhule is recruiting a guy like Shull, former basketball player. And you see that show up on the film on Friday nights. Phenomenal footwork for somebody who's 6'5", 280 pounds. And again, very similar story to David Sanders Jr. And a really similar story to how Matt Rhule wants to recruit the offensive lineman. He values the athleticism. And I think he says, hey, we want to get premier athletes. We're going to get them into this program, put the weight on them, put the weight the right way on them, and kind of get them coached up. But we want to have athletes to have the ideal functional athleticism, the ideal frame. David Sanders Jr., Broderick Shull, 2 guys that 100% kind of fit that bill. You go back to Grant Bricks in the 2025 class, very similar kind of offensive line prospect. And this is where Matt Rhule is prioritizing on the recruiting trail. He wants to get as many offensive linemen committed to this Nebraska program. And it's a great strategy because you look at how college football has evolved in terms of roster building. You can go address some different positions in the transfer portal, right? You go get a guy like Jamal Banks or Dante Dowdle. Those kind of players are available in the portal. What kind of players are not available in the portal? Starting caliber offensive linemen. Everybody wants them. There's not a lot that goes around. And what does that mean? It means you got to recruit these guys from the high school ranks, get them in the program, because that's a position that's much harder to address in the transfer portal than some other positions around the country, or around the field, I should say. Broderick Shull, David Sanders Jr., I think kind of highlights how Matt Rhule wants to go about his business on the recruiting trail. Another name that I want to highlight really quick, kind of diving into some film the other day, Nicholas Clayton, coming from the state of Florida. And I mean, one thing to point out, Matt Rhule, this coaching staff have done a phenomenal job, not just recruiting the state of Nebraska. We've talked about that extensively, but going down to the state of Texas, going down to the state of Florida. Nicholas Clayton, coming from Gainesville, Florida, another Matt Rhule kind of guy from the high school ranks. You take a look at the athletic profile, an ideal frame at 6'4", you got to put on some weight at 205, a ton of length in the arms. He's a track and field guy that does the triple jump as someone who's over 200 pounds. Matt Rhule loves these kind of guys that, hey, if you're a little raw around the edges as a football player, that's okay. We're going to get you in this program, get you coached up. But Matt Rhule goes about his business in terms of collecting premier athletes. Nicholas Clayton, another one of those guys. And I think the last name that I just want to reference for the Nebraska fans, and a guy that I'm very familiar with as well, Jaden Magnum, coming from Michigan State. He has emerged as a top target for Nebraska in the transfer portal. And we haven't really seen Nebraska get that active during this spring portal window. But I mean, quite frankly, they don't really have that many holes in this roster. I think Matt Rhule looks at this team heading into 2024 and say, we don't need to use the spring transfer portal like some other programs do. You look at Jaden and say, perfect fit in this Nebraska defense. We talk about one of the things that we want to see Nebraska take that step in heading into 2024. It really comes down to forcing some more turnovers. This defense was one of the best in the country, not only defending the run, but defending the pass. It was a premier defense. And I think one of those things we want to see a little bit more of is some of those forced turnovers. You look at a guy in Jaden Magnum, 4 interceptions during the 2023 season, was a second-team All-Big Ten kind of guy. You want Nebraska to force some more turnovers on the defensive side of the football. This is a kid that could make that happen. Really exciting next couple of days and weeks for Nebraska on the recruiting trail. We'll be sure to keep you guys as updated as possible. Again, appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.